My story didn't begin with betrayal. It started years ago in a kitchen filled with the aroma of simmering tomato sauce, the clatter of dishes, and the steady hum of family voices. As a boy, I watched my father orchestrate the madness of a Friday night dinner rush. He moved like a general in battle. Sharp, deliberate, never missing a step. "Respect the food, respect the family, and you'll never go hungry," he'd say. It wasn't just about cooking. It was about loyalty, tradition, and keeping our bloodline strong. By the time I was in my 20s, I had learned more about business than most men twice my age. My cousins and I grew up together, working the same kitchens, serving the same customers. But not all of us stayed on the straight path. Carlo, my closest cousin, was different. He had a way of handling things that didn't always align with the law, and while I stayed on the restaurant side of things, he built connections in places where debts were collected in blood. Then came Connie. She wasn't part of my world. She was a wild card. Independent, confident, and with a smile that could make a man forget his own name. We met at a bar, introduced through mutual friends, and it was supposed to be casual, but something about her kept me coming back. Before long, we weren't just dating. We were planning a future. My grandmother had reservations from the start. "Her eyes, Sal," she had warned. "They hide something." I laughed it off, convinced that I was in control. But control is an illusion. Over time, things shifted. Business was steady, life was good, but there were cracks beneath the surface. Carlo started showing up more often, whispering about things he'd uncovered. I dismissed it, told myself that trust mattered more than suspicion. That was my mistake. Because by the time I finally saw the truth, it was already too late. And now, driving through the neon-lit streets of London, I was about to confront the reality I had refused to see. Navigating through London's nocturnal congestion, I steered toward the Marriott Hotel, my thoughts spiraling through countless scenarios. Every possibility was measured, each consequence analyzed. Within the next few hours, multiple lives would be thrown off course. Whose fate would be sealed by sunrise remained an open question. They call me Sal, short for Salvatore. My roots are deep in the Italian restaurant business, a legacy my family has nurtured in the UK since the late 60s. Beyond just feeding my immediate relatives, our enterprise has been the backbone of a vast network of kin. Our bond runs deep, unshaken by the fact that we no longer reside under one roof. Skipping a family gathering? Unthinkable. That would earn you nothing short of my grandmother's piercing glare, a silent but lethal judgment. She governs the family with an unyielding grip, and her word is final. 7 years ago, I married Connie. We were both in our early 30s, coming off relationships that had left us feeling unfulfilled. We had our fun, dated casually, lived in the moment, and before long, we were exchanging vows. My grandmother never approved. She never voiced outright disapproval, just quiet vigilance. Before the wedding, she gave me a warning. "Sal, be careful with that one. There's something in her eyes. Don't let your heart get reckless." Her words echoed in my head as I steered through the city's streets. I wasn't rushing. I knew exactly where I was headed, and if anything changed, my phone would alert me. Even at this late hour, Marylebone Road was congested. The neon glow of London reflected against my windshield as I turned toward the city center. My pulse picked up. This whole facade was reaching its conclusion. A month ago, I uncovered Connie's betrayal. Secret meetings, twice a month, stretching back half a year. A careless slip gave her away. One evening, I found a cheap hotel pen on our dresser, one I didn't recognize. I always stayed at the same hotel chain collecting loyalty points, so the unfamiliar logo stood out. Later, I casually asked Connie if she had a pen. Without hesitation, she handed me the exact same one. My gut clenched. Something wasn't right. Instead of confronting her, I dug deeper. What had been a small crack in our marriage was now threatening to split wide open. That night, I kept my suspicions to myself and went out with friends, 2 other couples, for drinks and dancing. Carlo and Joanna, a little older than us, were distant relatives and had long been involved in the family business. Carlo had a traditional mindset, sometimes crossing ethical lines, but his loyalty to me was unshakable. Joanna, small but sharp-witted, was the only one who could rein him in. Then there was Phil, a co-worker I bonded with over golf. His wife, Terry, and Connie were inseparable shopping companions, always returning with armfuls of designer bags. Lately, though, Terry had seemed off. When I brought it up to Connie, she dismissed it with a casual, "Women's issues." That evening, as we drank, Carlo and Joanna arrived, and our glasses were promptly refilled. One of the perks of my cousin managing the bar, Connie soaked up the attention, relishing the VIP treatment. Our table was strategically placed, private, yet with a clear view of the entrance. That was always Carlo's unspoken rule. "Are Phil and Terry joining us?" Joanna asked. "I spoke to Terry earlier," Connie said. "They're coming, but Phil's running late." Carlo shot me a glance, his expression unreadable, before shaking his head subtly. Now wasn't the time to ask. I'd press him about it later. When Phil and Terry finally showed up, they looked unsettled, more than just hurried. Carlo's face remained stoic, but I knew him too well. He had noticed something. He always did. After dinner, we moved to the lounge, where the women lost themselves in the music. We stayed back sipping cocktails and watching the crowd. When the tempo slowed, it was our turn to dance. Connie pressed close, smirking, whispering that we should leave early. From across the room, I caught Phil and Terry swaying stiffly, their movements forced. "Something up with them?" I asked Connie. "They're fine," she said too quickly. When the women excused themselves to the restroom, the three of us remained at the table. "Everything all right?" Phil asked Carlo, his voice too casual. "Yeah, no issues," Carlo replied, but there was something in his tone, something off. Later, as we said our goodbyes, I noticed Connie speaking quietly with Phil, her tone urgent. A red flag. In the cab home, I asked, "What's going on with Phil and Terry?" "Nothing," she said, staring out the window with an unreadable smile. But I wasn't convinced. That night, Connie was different. More passionate, almost desperate. Afterward, she curled into me, murmuring, "That was amazing, baby. We should do this more often." Then she kissed me and added, "Just remember, I love you, Sal. Don't forget that." "I love you too," I told her. "You're my wife. No one's taking you from me, and I'll never give you a reason to leave." But something didn't sit right. The next morning, she left early for the gym while I stayed behind, nursing a headache. The events of the previous night played on repeat in my mind. Something was wrong. I grabbed my laptop and searched the name on that pen. A discreet, high-end hotel, easy to access, private parking. I checked our browser history. Nothing. It had been wiped. A pit formed in my stomach. I reached for my phone. "Carlo, it's me. What's going on with Phil and Terry? You know something. Should I be worried?" "Meet me at my brother's bar this afternoon," he said. "Not over the phone." "Got it." "And Sal?" "Yeah? Come alone." Now, I was officially concerned. An hour later, Connie returned, looking refreshed from her workout. "Good session?" I asked. "Yeah, just what I needed," she said, tossing her purse onto the counter. "I'm heading to see Carlo. He needs to talk." "What about?" she asked, her expression shifting. "Sal, he still gives me the creeps. I don't get how you trust him." "Yeah, well, don't mistake him for a softie," I said. "You wouldn't like him for long." She held my gaze for a moment, unreadable. Everyone around me felt off. At Carlo's brother's bar, I pressed the buzzer. Carlo opened the door, scanning the street before letting me in. That wasn't like him. "All right, what the hell's going on?" I demanded. "Your call freaked me out. Between that and everything else, I don't know what to think." "Come inside," he said. We stepped into a private office, sitting across from each other at a massive oak desk. "Sal, you're like a brother to me," he started. "I promised your father I'd always have your back, and I don't break my word, but what I'm about to tell you, it's gonna hurt." My stomach tightened. I already knew. This was about Connie. Carlo reached into a drawer, pulled out a thick manila envelope, and slid it across the desk. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. I didn't want to open it. Before I could reach for it, he placed a firm hand on top. "It's bad, isn't it?" I asked. He nodded. "I've got your back, Sal." When he finally let go, I picked up the envelope. It felt heavier than it should. My hands shook as I opened it. Photographs, high resolution, glossy, a man and a woman, entwined, undressed in a cheap hotel room. I stared. Their faces were unmistakable. More pictures, different nights, different places, some in public, some painfully intimate. And then I froze. There she was. My wife. In our bed. With him. "Sal?" Carlo's voice broke through the haze. "You good?" I kept turning the photos over in my hands, my pulse hammering, my stomach twisting into knots. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was the complete destruction of my marriage. "Who is he?" My voice came out hoarse, raw. Carlo hesitated for just a moment. "Tony Drew, Phil's brother." And just like that, everything snapped into focus. The exchanged glances, the tension in the air, the secrecy. It all traced back to that damn hotel pen. My hands clenched into fists. "I'm going to eliminate him," Carlo exhaled sharply. Don't be stupid. She's not worth it. Walk away. Let me handle him. I shook my head, jaw tight. No, this has to come from me. He needs to know exactly who's ending this. Carlo studied me for a moment before sighing. I get it. You want him to feel it, but don't go in blind. There's more in that envelope. Is he married? Where does he live? He's single, divorced, no kids, has a thing for married women, says they come with less baggage. Carlo's jaw tightened. But this time, he picked the wrong husband to mess with. I let out a slow breath, barely containing my rage. So, what's the move? Carlo poured a whiskey and slid the glass across the table. As I grabbed it, he swirled his own drink, watching me carefully. How close are you to Phil? He asked. Because last night something was off. The way he acted with his wife and yours, he knows. If that's the case, is he really your friend? My fingers tightened around the glass. I noticed it too. And if Terry's involved, then I don't see a reason to keep either of them in my life. Carlo nodded. We hit hard, hit fast, but first get a lawyer. If you're serious about cutting her loose, you need to be smart about it. Or, are you considering working things out? I let out a bitter laugh. If it was a one-time mistake, maybe, but this is beyond repair. Carlo set down his drink. Then start protecting yourself now. Play this right and you walk away with something. Trust me, you'll need it. I rubbed my temples. I want them both to suffer. I want them to feel this. A slow smirk crossed his face as he slid a business card across the table. This guy, divorce lawyer. Ruthless, no sympathy. He already knows the basics. Just say the word and he'll handle the rest. And yeah, he's family. Despite the fury burning inside me, I smirked. Our family had connections everywhere. For the next hour, we strategized. I made the call. Cousin Carlo, the lawyer, got to work immediately. The papers wouldn't be served until everything was lined up. In the meantime, I needed to determine just how deep Phil and Terry were wrapped up in this. I left Carlo's place with my head spinning. My grip on the steering wheel was so tight, my knuckles turned white. When I got home, the house was quiet. Connie was gone. A note sat on the kitchen counter. Meeting up with Terry. Love you. I crumpled it and tossed it into the trash before dialing Carlo. She says she's with Terry, I said. I know, he replied. She's at Phil's place. But Terry isn't there, just Phil. I've got a guy watching her. We'll keep an eye on her as long as needed. And Terry? If she makes a move, we'll know. 3 hours later, Connie walked through the door. Hey, love. She kissed my cheek and strolled into the kitchen. How was your day? I asked, studying her closely. Fine, she shrugged. Carlo wanted to talk about something, but we're working on a plan. She eyed me, waiting for details. I gave her nothing, forcing her to ask. Eventually, she did. Just some family business, I answered smoothly. He suspects his wife is cheating, wanted some advice. I watched her reaction. She kept her expression neutral, but I caught the briefest flicker of hesitation. I'm sure they'll figure it out, she said, quickly looking away. The rest of the weekend dragged. I couldn't bring myself to touch her. Every time I looked at her, those images flashed through my mind. How could she act so normal? She was a better liar than I'd ever given her credit for. By Sunday night, she finally made a move. Sal, I need you tonight, she murmured. So, I played my part. Afterward, we lay in silence. She watched me, confused. What's wrong? We've never done that before, she whispered. I turned to her, forcing a smile. Just needed to remind myself that you're mine, I lied. I love you, Connie. I don't want to lose you. She smiled and curled into me, pressing a kiss to my jaw. You won't, silly. I'm all yours. I kissed her back, even as her words cut through me like a blade. When she fell asleep, I slipped out of bed, poured myself a drink, and opened my laptop. A message from Carlo popped up. Everything's in motion. I typed back, good. An hour later, I crawled back into bed, but sleep never came. The rage in my chest refused to settle. By morning, I was showered, dressed, and downstairs before Connie. She handed me a cup of coffee and a piece of toast. You were wild last night, she teased. I don't think I'll be ready for another round for a few days. I forced a smile, swallowing my disgust. She sipped her coffee. I have to go to Leeds on Wednesday, just overnight. That okay? For what? Something with a cousin I told you about. No big deal. She rolled her eyes. Carlo still creeps me out. I smirked. You'd be surprised how useful he can be. But trust me, you don't want to be on his bad side. For just a second, her face paled. She was calculating something. I checked my watch and stood. I gotta head out. Be a good girl while I'm gone. Before she could respond, I kissed the top of her head and walked out. I drove straight to the lawyer's office. We went over my options and I signed the paperwork. By Wednesday, everything would be finalized. Next stop, the bank. I drained our savings into a new account under my name, wired a portion to Carlo to hold, and emptied the safe deposit box. Connie's credit cards? Canceled. She'd feel it soon enough. At the office, my assistant, Sadie, had everything running smoothly, but she was watching me. I sighed. Sadie, things are about to get complicated. If I'm not around, you know what to do. Of course, boss. Then she hesitated. Is there anything else I can do? She was sharp, always had been. Connie's cheating, I said flatly. Her eyes widened. You're serious? I nodded. She saw the exhaustion in my face, and without hesitation, she shut the office door. Then, unexpectedly, she hugged me. For the first time since discovering the truth, I felt my chest crack open. She held me until I steadied myself, then cupped my face with both hands. Sal, you're a good man. Don't let this break you. What's the plan? I'm divorcing her, I said, and I'm making sure that fool pays. She exhaled. Yeah, I figured. Just be careful. I nodded. By the end of the day, everything was in motion. And Connie. She had no idea what was coming. That night, we sat on the couch watching TV when her phone rang. She stepped into the hallway to answer, voice hushed, words just out of reach. 5 minutes later, she returned, looking neutral, but her shoulders held tension. Who was that? I asked. Terry, she answered lightly. Going on about Phil again. Same old drama. They need to figure it out. Phil never mentioned any issues, I mused. She shrugged. Probably nothing. They'll work through it. Was that what was happening at the restaurant? For a split second, hesitation flashed in her eyes. Yeah, she answered too smoothly. I just smirked. Tomorrow I'd visit Phil, stir the pot, see what shook loose.
The next morning, I was still groggy when Sal brushed past me on his way out. Busy day before I leave tomorrow. Love you, he said, kissing my cheek like usual before heading to the garage. Something felt different. I stood in the kitchen sipping my coffee, lost in thought. My mind drifted to Tony. Everything had been going so well, until last week. I had met Tony a few months ago on a night out with Terry. We were at a small club with some friends when he walked in. Seeing his sister-in-law, he approached the group, flashing that signature smile, and offered everyone a drink. The women exchanged glances, appreciating the good-looking man in their presence. But the second our eyes met, something changed. Terry noticed immediately. Stay away from Tony, she warned in a low voice. He's a real piece of crap. He even hit on me before. He'll go after anyone with a pulse, especially married ones. I laughed, waving her off. Relax, I have Sal, but honestly, Terry, he's smooth. Even you have to admit that. Terry shook her head, serious. One word, don't. But something had already shifted in my mind. The rest of the night passed uneventfully, at least as far as Terry knew. But at some point, Tony slipped me his number. At first, it was harmless. A few playful texts, some teasing calls. Then the next time we all went out, Tony was there again. This time there was dancing. And as soon as he had me in his arms, he started working on me. Flattering words, lingering hands, that electrifying tension. I didn't even realize how much time had passed until Terry grabbed my elbow, pulling me away. You spent the entire night with him, she scolded as we walked out of the club. It's nothing, I insisted, brushing her off. But Tony had already decided. He was going to have me. Over the next few weeks, the calls increased. The flirting turned into something deeper. The tension between us was undeniable. Then one night, everything changed. Terry canceled our plans and Tony saw his opening. Just a drink, he coaxed over the phone. As friends. I hesitated, but deep down I had already decided. I got dressed as if I were going out with Terry, but this time it felt different. That night, after drinks, he took me to the Marriott Hotel. Hours slipped away in a blur of tangled sheets and whispered words. When I finally noticed the time, panic set in. I rushed to get dressed, my hands shaking as I texted Sal. Waiting for a cab, be home soon. That night terrified me, but when I slipped into bed, Sal was already asleep. I lay there, heart pounding, hoping that by morning the guilt would fade. It didn't. The affair continued. Girls' nights became excuses. Daytime meetups at the hotel became routine. When Sal was away for business, I spent entire nights with Tony. Terry figured it out fast. "You need to stop," she warned, her voice sharp. "You're going to get caught, Connie. And when you do, it's not going to be pretty." She even fought with Phil about it, demanding he talk to Tony. She wanted him to put a stop to it before everything imploded. Phil did try, once. "You need to stop seeing my brother," he told me quietly at the restaurant. "This is getting out of hand." I lashed out, denying everything. My voice was sharp enough to turn heads. Phil backed off. What else could he do? Now, I sat at the kitchen table, sipping my coffee, replaying everything. Tony didn't love me. I knew that. I was just a game to him. Tomorrow, I told myself. Tomorrow would be the last time. One more night. Then I'd end it. But convincing Tony? That was another story.
By the time I got home, it was late. The lawyer's paperwork sat in my car, ready to be mailed in the morning. Connie was in the living room when I walked in. I didn't say a word, just headed straight to the liquor cabinet and poured myself a drink. "Rough day?" she asked hesitantly. I met her gaze, a flicker of something in her eyes. Fear. "Yeah," I said flatly, swallowing the whiskey. "Taking a shower, meeting Carlo tomorrow." I walked past her up the stairs. She felt the shift, sensed the storm brewing, and she knew why. Tomorrow, it would all come crashing down. Under the scalding water, I let my tears mix with the spray. My marriage, my life, everything I had built, it was wrecked, and there was no fixing it. By the time I stepped out, I had pulled myself together. Back in the kitchen, Connie watched me carefully, her expression unreadable. I gave nothing away. We sat in silence, pretending to watch TV, but neither of us was really paying attention. Two players waiting for the final move. "Leaving at 9 tomorrow," I said casually. She nodded. "It's getting late. Think I'll turn in." I stood, drained my glass, and looked at her. For a brief second, I saw something else in her eyes. Regret. She hesitated. "Sal," I pulled her into a tight hug. "I want you to know something, Connie," I whispered. "I've always loved you like no one else." She held on to me, her heartbeat quick, her guilt thick in the air. "Tomorrow I'll end it," she thought. "Then I'll make it up to him." I was thinking the same thing, almost. I woke to the scent of coffee, strong, rich, the kind that clung to the air like a memory. Downstairs, Connie was waiting with a fresh mug. I took it, kissed her cheek, and let the dark liquid wake me up. I picked at some toast, not really hungry. The kitchen was quiet, save for the occasional clink of cups. We exchanged glances, but never held them for long. We were both waiting for this to be over. I checked my watch. "I have to go. Need to pick up Carlo." I downed the rest of my coffee and stood, gripping the handle of my overnight bag. Connie looked up, forcing a weak smile. "Have a safe trip, Sal. Come back soon." I leaned down, kissed her forehead. She blinked, confused by the sudden tenderness. Without another word, I stepped outside, started the car, and backed out of the driveway. As I turned onto the road, tears burned behind my eyes. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Judgment Day had arrived. A few minutes later, Connie picked up her phone. Her fingers trembled slightly as she dialed. "He's gone," she whispered. On the other end, Tony's voice came through, smooth and confident. "You still ready for tonight?" "Oh, yeah, baby. Definitely," Connie replied, her tone eager. "We're gonna make it a good night." Tony let out a low chuckle. "I had to tell Phil to back off. He's been on my A lately." Connie's voice sharpened. "Did he say anything?" "Yeah, but I shut him down." Tony's voice darkened. "And his nosy wife?" "She's watching me, but she won't talk. She wouldn't dare." "That won't stop us," Connie purred. "I can't wait. I got our usual room, 415. Just pick up the key at the desk." His voice dropped into a near whisper. "See you at 8. "Got it," Connie smiled. "I'll call you later." The line went dead. Tony smirked and sent a message. Then he grabbed his gear and left. Carlo exhaled sharply as he read the text, rubbing his jaw before turning to me. "You sure about this, Sal?" His voice was measured, careful. "I need to ask before we go too far. You know how this ends, right?" I met his eyes. My closest friend, my brother in everything but blood. "I loved that woman, Carlo. Gave her everything, and she threw it away for him." My voice was steady, but my chest burned. "She needs to understand what she's done. And he needs to pay." Carlo studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "I get it. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a tool, placing it on the table between us. The steel gleamed under the low light. I stared at it, feeling the weight of what was coming. "This will solve part of your problem," Carlo said quietly. He slid a handful of bullets next to the tool. "Load it, Sal. Not because you have to use it, but because you need to know you can." I picked up the tool, the cold metal settling into my palm. My hands moved instinctively, loading each round with precision before snapping the cylinder shut. I placed the tool back on the table. Carlo watched me. "You good?" I nodded. "All right, we have time. Let's eat first. Then I'll fill you in on the plan." He leaned back, stretching his arms. "Was thinking of calling Phil. See how much he knows. Find out why he didn't warn us." I shook my head. "Leave it. If we push now, we give them a reason to cover their tracks. We wait." Carlo sighed. "Yeah, you're right." We walked into the bar, where Carlo introduced me to his brother, Alfredo. "Good to finally meet you, Sal," Alfredo said, shaking my hand. "Carlo's told me a lot." A waitress appeared with food, setting it in front of us. She smiled. "Hi, Sal. I'm Alicia. My Uncle Carlo has told me a lot about you." Alfredo shot her a look. "Alicia?" I smirked. "Nice to meet you." Lunch passed in a strangely normal atmosphere. The hum of conversation, the clinking of glasses, it all felt surreal. Then my phone rang. It was Connie. I answered smoothly. "Hi, love. How's your day?" "Just checking in," she replied. "How's Carlo and his little issue?" "All good. Having lunch before we take care of business," I said, keeping my tone even. "What about you? Any plans for tonight?" "Oh, I might see Terry," she said casually. Another lie. "That's good," I responded, keeping my voice light. "I was going to check in with Phil. I think he'll be out with his brother tonight." There was a pause. Barely a second, but I caught it. "I've never met Phil's brother," she said after a beat. "What's he like?" "Looks a lot like Phil." I glanced at my watch. "Gotta run. We need to get to the hotel for the meeting." "Okay," she murmured. "Love you." "Love you too, baby." I ended the call, my grip tightening around the phone. Carlo had been watching me the whole time. He saw the pain in my eyes, but also something else. Rage, the kind that doesn't just simmer, the kind that burns everything down. He sighed. "You ready for this, Sal?" I clenched my jaw. "Yeah, let's go." The men exchanged glances. No words were needed. They understood. Carlo turned to them. "All right, everything in place?" One nodded. "Checked and double-checked. Cars are set, vans ready, access to the hotel and exit secured. Disposals arranged for 30 minutes post-move." We reviewed the plan, ensuring no loose ends. I paced the room, feeling their eyes on me. The weight in my chest was suffocating. Connie was likely getting ready right now, slipping into something for him. The thought made my fists clench. Carlo stepped in front of me, gripping my shoulders. "Easy, Sal. Breathe," I inhaled sharply. "We roll out soon," he reassured me. "It gets easier from here." Easier. As if. The rage, betrayal, and loss boiled inside me. Carlo stayed close, grounding me while the men kept me focused. An hour passed, each of them checking in, making sure I was steady. Once we left this room, there was no turning back. The phone rang. Silence fell. Carlo answered. "Yeah?" His voice was calm, controlled. The room held its breath. "All right, we move in 5. I checked my watch. 8 o'clock. Time had vanished. The men headed to their vehicles, positioning the van closer. Carlo gave me one last look. "Sal, last chance. You don't have to do this." I locked eyes with him, jaw tight. That fool disrespected me, my family. He thinks there are no consequences. I'm about to change that. Carlo nodded, clapping my shoulder as we stepped out. We slid into the waiting black Mercedes, the tension thick. We parked 200 yards from the hotel. No one spoke. At 9, Carlo's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then met my eyes. "They're here." Pain knifed through my chest. My hands curled into fists. Carlo's firm grip landed on my shoulder. "Stick to the plan," he warned. I nodded. Another text. "The guys are in position." Everything was set. Entry, exit, timing, precision was key. Carlo ran through the plan again, making sure I stayed in control. "We're not here for a massacre, Sal. We handle this right." His tone was ice. I exhaled. "I know. And relax. I'm not putting a bullet in him while he's still in bed." I smirked, a flicker of dark humor. "Even I'm not that dumb." Carlo slapped the back of my head. "This isn't a joke, Sal. Get a grip." Minutes passed. Another message. "We're in. Exit secured." Carlo checked his watch. It was time. His heartbeat quickened, breath steady but heavier now. He opened the glove compartment, slipping brass knuckles onto his fingers. The car door clicked open. I followed, my pulse pounding as we moved through the hotel lobby, blending in. The place buzzed with late-night guests, none of them paying us any attention. At the elevator, we stood in silence. The doors slid open. A couple stepped out, lost in conversation. We entered. 4th floor. The doors chimed. My heart pounded so loud I barely heard it. Carlo led the way to room 415. 4 men in hotel staff uniforms approached with a laundry cart. Small details set them apart. The way they moved, the way they carried themselves. One held a key card, another, a taser. Carlo pointed to the security cameras. Disabled. We have 5 minutes. The key card swiped. A green light flashed, and the lock clicked open. We already knew the layout. The bedroom was down a short hall past the sitting area. Without hesitation, we moved. A dress lay discarded on the floor. I knew that dress. She'd worn it for me. My stomach twisted, but there was no room for hesitation. The men entered first. My job was simple. Let them take him, then I'd deal with her. Carlo stepped in. Dim light cast shadows across the bed. Tony, on top of my wife, oblivious. Then came the sound of the laundry cart rolling over the threshold. Tony turned his head slightly, his brows furrowing. And then, zap! The taser shot him square in the A. His body convulsed, locking up as volts ripped through him. Connie screamed. Tony twitched, muscles seizing as his weight pinned her down in a series of uncontrolled spasms. 2 men grabbed him, yanking him off the bed. It was over in seconds. Connie shrieked, about to scream again. Duct tape. Tony, dazed, was stuffed into the laundry cart. The lid snapped shut. Gone. Just like that. Connie thrashed, but her wrists and ankles were already bound. Panic filled her eyes as realization set in. She was utterly helpless. The overhead light flicked on. I stepped forward. She lay frozen on the bed, her eyes darting between the masked men and me. Slowly, I pulled my Colt and aimed it at her face. She whimpered, flinching, trying to retreat, muffled cries spilling through the gag as tears streamed down her face. I stepped closer, letting the silence press down on her. Her blinking quickened as recognition dawned. Terror swelled in her gaze. She had to feel this. Carlo stood beside me, watching, waiting. I tightened my grip on the Colt, my finger resting on the trigger. Connie's breath hitched, but then something strange happened. Her trembling stopped, replaced by a flicker of something else. Carlo tensed. Before he could react, I pulled the trigger. Click, an empty chamber. Connie shrieked, convulsing with terror. Her body jerked so violently she lost control of herself. A wet stain spread across the sheets as she pissed herself. Carlo snatched the Colt from my hand, exhaling sharply before laughing under his breath. "Jesus, Sal," he muttered, shaking his head. I didn't move. I let her sit in it. She sobbed, her body trembling as she processed what had just happened. Then I reached up, grasped the edge of my mask, and pulled it off. Her breath caught. Her pupils blew wide. Then she passed out. Carlo checked his phone, gave a nod. Time to go. We slipped out through the service stairs, vanishing into the night. Minutes later, back in the car, neither of us spoke. The city lights blurred past. Carlo smirked. "Took the bullets out, huh?" I chuckled, low and dark. "Had you worried? Thought you snapped." "Nah, I wasn't going down for that witch. But damn, it felt good to scare her." Carlo exhaled. "Guess she'll get the message when she sees Tony again. The guys will handle him." I nodded. "I need to be sure." We rode in silence. At Alfredo's bar, drinks were poured, and we sat in the back, firelight flickering across the walls. The exhaustion seeped in. Carlos's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then smirked. "It's done." I let out a slow breath. "The boys are on their way," he added. I ran a hand down my face. "I don't know how to thank them." "Shut up, Sal." Carlo's voice was firm. "It's over. Now you deal with her, and you don't need my permission for how." I nodded. Nothing else needed to be said. For the first time, I thought about what came next. Connie knew. She knew I had been in that hotel room, that I had seen everything. Would she even come home? I doubted it. I needed to reroute the divorce papers. She wouldn't step foot in our house after tonight. She'd run straight to Terry's. I picked up my phone. "Change the delivery address," I said. Carlo just shook his head and took a sip of his drink. After a few restless hours of sleep, Alicia woke me with a steaming mug of coffee. "It's lunchtime, Sal," she smirked. "You've got 30 minutes. Carlo says you have an afternoon flight, so get moving." She patted my shoulder and left. I sat up slowly, rubbing my face. My reflection stared back at me from across the room. I recognized him. But he wasn't the same. I wasn't the same. Last night, I had nearly eliminated a man. I had watched him dragged away, his fate sealed, and I felt nothing, no regret, no guilt. Whatever happened to Tony now, that was on him. I just hoped it hurt. I got dressed and joined the others at the table. The normalcy of breakfast felt surreal, yet grounding. We ate, talked, even laughed, but soon it was time to leave. We stepped outside, the cold air biting. I waved at the faces watching me go, Alfredo, Alicia, the others. Their concern was evident. I wasn't alone. That mattered. As Carlo drove, I stared out the window, the city blurring past. The drive home felt like a countdown to something inevitable. With each mile, the anger faded, replaced by something hollow. I had spent years loving Connie. Even after everything, some part of me still did. When we pulled up to Carlo's house, Joanna was already outside. The second he stepped out, she wrapped her arms around him, like she hadn't seen him in years. I swallowed hard. Then she turned to me, pulling me into a warm embrace. "Sal, it's gonna be okay," she whispered. "There's always a tomorrow, even when it feels like there isn't. You'll get through this." I couldn't respond. Carlo gave me a firm hug before stepping back. "Call me later." I nodded and drove off. For the first time in hours, I was alone. The house was dark when I pulled into the driveway. Inside, the heating was on, but it did little to warm the silence. I moved through the rooms. Living room, kitchen, nothing. 6 p.m. Connie should have been home, unless she thought she could save our marriage. I pulled out my phone. No calls, no messages. I sank into a chair in the living room, the quiet pressing down on me. "What a goddamn anticlimax," I muttered. The anger I had buried started to rise again. My gaze landed on a framed photo of us on the mantel. Without thinking, I grabbed it and hurled it across the room. The silver frame shattered against the wall, glass scattering across the floor. "Screw you!" I growled. I was still staring at the broken shards when the phone rang. I grabbed it, my grip tightening. "Yeah?" A hesitant voice came through the line. "Oh, I'm sorry. Is that you, Sal?" I recognized the voice instantly. "Yes, it's me," I said, my tone sharp. "What do you want?" "It's Terry." She hesitated, then added, "Sal, Connie's here. She's in bad shape." I exhaled slowly. "Is she?" Terry's voice softened. "She won't talk. She doesn't want to go home. She thinks you might hurt her." A dry, humorless chuckle escaped me. "Interesting." "She's in no condition to drive, Sal." I cut her off. "Is she with you now?" "Yes." "Hand her the phone." More silence. Then Terry came back. "She won't talk to you. She's terrified." I smirked. "That tells me everything I need to know." I leaned back in my chair and spoke calmly. "Ask her what happened. Let's see what she says." Muffled voices drifted through the phone, then a scream. A moment later, Terry returned to the line, her voice unsteady. "Sal, I don't know what to tell you." "I do," I said. A pause. Terry hesitated. "What do you mean?" "I know, Terry. I know everything." Silence. Then a sharp inhale. "Oh my God." I heard her turn away from the receiver, relaying my words to Connie. Another scream, then sobbing. When Terry spoke again, her voice wavered. "Sal, I'm so sorry." "Me too." She took a shaky breath. "Phil and we tried to stop it. We fought with her so many times, but she wouldn't listen. Tony, I know about Tony." I cut in. A strangled sound escaped her. "Oh, God. And I know exactly when and where I'll be seeing him again." My voice was ice. "Believe me, he's going to pay." "Sal, I swear, Phil and I tried. We both did. She wouldn't stop. We didn't know how to tell you." I sighed. "I don't blame you, but I wish you'd told me sooner." "I know," she whispered. "I'm sorry." "It doesn't matter now." I exhaled slowly, forcing the last of my patience out with my breath. "Tell Connie I'm not coming to get her. Her stuff will be packed and ready. If she doesn't pick it up, it's going in the trash. Sal, I mean everything, Terry. She doesn't live here anymore." Terry hesitated, as if searching for the right words. "And tell her to expect a delivery," I continued. "I had the papers rerouted to your place. Figured she'd run to you." I heard a nervous shuffle on the other end. "They should be arriving any minute now." I ran a hand through my hair. "Tell her to think before she calls me." "Okay, Sal." Her voice was barely a whisper. I hung up. The house was silent again. The anger drained out of me. The game was over. Maybe Connie had been gone long before I ever caught her. Maybe I had just been too blind to see it. I hated her. I loved her. I missed her. I poured myself a drink and took a slow sip. The burn felt good. I let the whiskey do its job, dulling everything into nothing. I woke up with a mouth like sandpaper and a dull, familiar headache. Dragging myself to the shower, I let the hot water rinse away what was left of last night. Downstairs, I turned on the coffee maker, took a swig of orange juice straight from the carton, and waited. At exactly 7:30 a.m., my phone rang. Yeah? Sal, it's Carlo. His voice was low. Just checking in. Wanted to make sure you hadn't done anything too stupid. I'm fine, I muttered. Hungover, but fine. She didn't go home? Nope. She ran to Terry and Phil's. I let her know I knew everything. Haven't heard from her since. Carlo chuckled. No surprise, but things are handled. The package has been delivered. Don't expect to hear much for a few days. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. I won't check in till tomorrow, he added. Got some things to handle? The family sends their regards. Understood. Call if you need anything. I will. The line went dead. I poured myself a coffee, sipping it as the fog in my mind cleared. First, I'd check in at the office, then call a locksmith, change the locks, sort the bank accounts. It was time to move forward, even if part of me didn't want to let her go. By 9, a quiet knock at the door. I opened it to find Terry and Phil standing there, guilt written all over their faces. Terry hesitated. Sal, we came to apologize. It's the least we owe you. Can we come in? I stepped aside, letting them in. Without a word, I motioned toward the living room. They sat together on the couch while I took the chaise lounge across from them. All right, I said flatly. Say what you came to say. Phil cleared his throat. Sal, we're really sorry. I scoffed. Yeah? Well, I'm sorry too, Phil. Sorry that two people I trusted didn't think I deserved to know my wife was screwing around. Sorry that she decided some lowlife was more exciting than me. Hell, I've got plenty of regrets. The anger stirred again, simmering beneath the surface. Sal, we tried to stop her, Terry pleaded. Both of them, but they wouldn't listen. She's at our place now, and she still doesn't seem to grasp what's happening. But something bad happened before she came back last night. I narrowed my eyes. What do you mean? Terry hesitated. She was shaken, like something went really wrong. I kept my expression neutral. I was out of town Wednesday handling business, then you called me. So, are you saying something happened with Tony? Phil exhaled. I don't know. I've tried calling my brother, but he's not answering. He's not at his place, and Connie says she has no clue where he is. Keeps muttering something about being tied up, and that he left her at the hotel. I let out a slow breath. Come on, Phil. She must have said more than that. Did he do something to her? I paused. Not that I give a damn. Wherever that piece of garbage is now, I don't care. But I'll tell you this. If I ever see him again, he's going to regret it. You understand me? Phil and Terry exchanged a glance, startled by the ice in my voice. Anyway, I continued, exhaling sharply. Aside from that waste of space, how's Connie holding up? I assume she got the papers? Terry nodded. Yeah. She fell apart at first, then just shut down. But when she saw the divorce papers, it really hit her. Good. I leaned back. Maybe she'll replay that night over and over again. Maybe she'll feel a fraction of the pain she put me through. Terry bit her lip. Sal, I know you're angry, but are you sure this is the end? You two were good together. Can't you at least talk to her? Divorce is a big step. I stared at her. A big step? No, Terry. Spreading her legs for another man was a big step. This is just consequences. Terry's eyes filled with tears. Sal, please, just talk to her. She deserves that much. My jaw clenched. I had always liked Terry and Phil, even after their silence in all this. And despite everything, part of me couldn't deny that her words carried weight. I exhaled. Fine, I'll talk to her. But first, I want her stuff gone. When I speak to her, it'll be just the two of us. I'll call her. Let her know when and where. That's the deal. Got it? Terry let out a breath of relief and rushed over, hugging me. That's all we can ask for. And probably more than she deserves. Phil nodded. Thanks, man. I'll tell her to expect your call. Just don't wait too long. That would be cruel. Phil looked at me, his expression filled with an understanding that came too late. Sal, I'm sorry. My brother's an a-hole. You should kick his A properly. I wouldn't blame you one bit if you did. I didn't respond. Just watched as they got into their car and drove off, heading back to my soon-to-be ex-wife. I sat back, replaying Terry's words. I needed to talk to Connie, but not yet. I needed to cool down first. Trusting that woman again, even at arm's length, was already a stretch. I poured another coffee, the bitterness grounding me. Then I called Sadie. For the next half hour, she updated me on the office. What a woman. She practically ran the place better than I did. And of course, she had opinions about Connie, like listening to my mother. By the time she was done, she had somehow convinced me to come over for dinner with her and her husband. I hung up, shaking my head. That woman was at least half Italian. The rest of the day was spent clearing out every trace of Connie, changing locks, packing up clothes, moving furniture, tossing out photos. By the time I was done, the house looked different. Felt different. The anger, though still simmering, had lost some of its fire. For the first time in years, tears came easily. That's when I knew. I was done. The only thing left was the final conversation, and I knew it would hurt like hell, for both of us. I stared out the window, watching the city lights blur into the night, the weight of my marriage crumbling around me. I should call her, but not tonight. I was too exhausted to go a few hard rounds with her. I poured a whiskey and let the burn carry me to sleep. The phone rang early, jolting me awake just before 7:30. I groaned, rubbing my eyes, then reached for it. Yeah, Sal, it's Phil. His voice was tense. Listen, I just got a call from the hospital. My brother's been there for a few days now. I sat up, fully awake. What? He got kicking pretty bad. He's stable, but both arms and legs are broken. And his balls? Well, let's just say they didn't hold up too well either. I smirked. Phil, I hope you're not expecting sympathy. He's lucky he didn't meet me first. If I ever see him again, I'll finish the job. Phil sighed. I get it, Sal. I won't ask questions. He got what he deserved, and for what it's worth, you're a stand-up guy. I know I wasn't the friend I should have been. I can't undo what's done, but I thought you'd want to know. It's not on you, Phil. It's just the way things go. A pause. Give my best to Terry, I added. Yeah, thanks, Sal. The line went dead. I watched the birds in the garden, fluttering around the feeder, oblivious to human nonsense. Usually the sight calmed me. Today my mind was elsewhere. I grabbed my phone again and called Carlo. Yeah? He answered. Just heard about Tony. Carlo snorted. Yeah? How's the fool holding up? He's breathing, but he's got 2 broken arms, 2 broken legs, and, some permanent damage below the belt. Carlo chuckled. Good. The boys did their job right. Nothing too permanent, but enough to send a message. Yeah. Phil told me himself. He's spooked. He should be. That was just a warning. If he even thinks about causing trouble again, next time he won't be getting out of a hospital bed. I exhaled. Phil will pass the message. No need to stir up more noise than we already have. Carlo agreed. Smart move. We left it at that. Minutes later, my phone rang again. I let it go to voicemail. Then Connie's voice came through, soft, broken. Sal, please call me. We need to talk. I'm so sorry. I need to explain. I need you. I need to come home. Please, Sal, I'm so sorry. Her sobs cut through the message, desperate. By the time it ended, I realized I was gripping the edge of the table, breathing hard. I wanted to pick up, but I didn't. Not yet. She needed to feel this. I watched the moving van pull away with the last of her things. When she saw her things packed and shipped away, she'd finally understand just how badly she had screwed up. There was no coming back from this. The phone rang again. I picked it up, already knowing who it would be. Sal, Connie's stuff just arrived, Terry said. Just letting you know we accepted it. Most of it's in storage, but we kept the personal items you marked. Good, I said, keeping my voice even. Terry hesitated. Sal, she's in shock. I let out a short breath. I bet she is. I know she called you earlier, Terry continued. Can you talk to her, or at least call her back? I exhaled, slow and controlled. Put her on, Terry. Let's get this over with. A few seconds passed. Then her voice, soft, hesitant, like she didn't know whether to speak at all. Hello? Connie, I said, my voice cold. Oh my God, Sal, I'm so sorry. I never meant to. You never meant to get caught. I cut in, sharp and unrelenting. Sal, don't, I snapped. Now you have your answer. Every question you should have asked yourself while you were screwing him. This is the answer. Sal, please, can't we fix this? I let out a bitter laugh. You think there's anything you can say to undo what you did? Go ahead, try. I'm listening. Silence. Then, barely above a whisper, can I come home and talk to you? I gripped the phone tighter, forcing down the anger bubbling under my skin. Just hearing her voice made my pulse quicken, my breathing heavier. I fought to keep control. I took a slow breath. Tonight. Here. 7 o'clock. A pause. Come or don't, it's all the same to me. You have until 7:05. That's it. She sighed at my coldness, but I didn't care. I hung up without another word. I sat there, her voice still echoing in my head. I had heard the regret, but did she feel my pain? Did she understand the damage she had done? I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. I had believed in us, trusted her, never once doubted our marriage. Had I been blind? Had there been others? Doubt twisted like a knife in my gut. The clock chimed. 6:45. She'd be here soon. I needed to keep my emotions in check. This was the last act of our marriage. The doorbell rang, sharp and final. I took a deep breath, stood up, and walked toward the door, my steps slow and deliberate. When I opened it, I saw her, for the first time since that night. She looked different. Her hair was pulled back too tightly, making her face seem hollow. No makeup. Her skin pale, almost sickly. Her shoulders slumped, her posture that of someone who had lost more than she was willing to admit. She hesitated before stepping inside, scanning the living room. I watched as her eyes darted around, searching for something familiar. Then she realized what was missing. The photos, the memories, us. She gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. It's all gone, I said, my voice empty. Look around. Plenty of empty spaces now. She swallowed hard, blinking rapidly. I didn't mean for this to happen, Sal. I wasn't thinking. I know, I cut in. And this is the result. Your choices, your affair. This is yours, Connie. I hope it was worth it. Every word landed like a blow. She collapsed onto the couch, shoulders shaking as silent tears streamed down her face. I poured a drink, set it in front of her, and sat across from her, my own glass in hand. Okay, Connie, I said, voice like steel. Talk. She wiped her face, hands trembling. I'm sorry, Sal. I got in too deep. It became addictive. I scoffed. Addictive? I fell for his lies, she whispered. You guess? I shook my head. I talked to Terry and Phil. I know everything. What I don't know is why. She exhaled shakily. It was exciting. It was new. I have no excuse, Sal. I was wrong. But you enjoyed it, I said, my grip tightening on my glass. Not once, not twice, for weeks. She looked down. I know I can't justify what I did, but can we move past this? I ignored the plea. What about Tony? I asked coldly. She fidgeted, avoided my eyes. We were caught that night, she admitted. 5 or 6 men. Then Tony was just gone. They took him. Her voice faltered. I watched her, unreadable. She swallowed hard. Did you set that up, Sal? I let the silence stretch. Did she recognize me that night? Did she see my eyes before she passed out in fear? She shuddered. It was horrible. They took him away and then they tied me up. One of them put a Colt to my head. He pulled the trigger, but I blacked out. I thought I was going to die, Sal. Her voice cracked, raw with terror. I let it hang between us, savoring her discomfort. So, Hooker, I spat, watching her flinch. What happened to your lover? Sal, don't call him that, she whispered. He's not my lover. Yes, She swallowed hard. Yes, I slept with him, but I never loved him. I love you, Sal. Only you. I scoffed. You love me? You loved me so much that you spent weeks screwing around? She shrank back. Okay, promiscuous, I continued, venom in every syllable. Why the hell should I believe anything you say? Tears fell freely. Her breath hitched. So, tell me, have you heard from him? She wiped her face. No. Phil said he's in a hospital somewhere. That's all I know. I don't want to know. He ruined my life, Sal. I wish he were dead, I smirked. Well, for once, we agree on something. She stiffened at my tone. I watched her carefully. She wasn't mourning him. She wasn't heartbroken. She was terrified. Not of losing him, but of me. Silence stretched between us. I let it. Her gaze swept the room, searching, and then she froze. Her breath caught as she registered what was missing. The mantle. Her lips parted in a silent gasp. Slowly, she stood and ran her fingers over the empty spaces where our life had once been displayed. When she turned to face me, her eyes were pleading. Sal, is there really no chance? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. My voice was steady, cold. Connie, I loved you like no one else. And you destroyed that, disrespected it, humiliated me, for weeks, out in the open. Our friends knew, people saw you. She winced, but said nothing. Don't tell me it was just Zex. You knew exactly what you were doing. A shiver ran through her. Your lover is already paying his price, I said, watching her reaction. Her breath hitched. What do you mean? I ignored the question. And you? I let out a bitter chuckle. You're next. Her lip trembled. Sal, I'm not forgiving you, Connie. I will ruin you. But I'll do it slowly. Her hands shook as she set her glass down, careful not to let it clink against the table. Connie, we're done. She searched my face for hope. There was none. Sign the divorce papers, I said, standing. Let's end this farce. Sal, please. I don't want to see you. I don't want to know you. I walked to the door, pulled it open, and leveled her with a final cutting look. Now get the freak out of my house, hooker, she gasped. Her body trembled as she stepped outside. She turned back, one last time. I'm sorry, she whispered. I lifted my hand, formed a Colt with my fingers. Her breath hitched. I cocked my thumb like a trigger. Click. She ran. I watched her car disappear into the night, exhaled, rolled my shoulders. It was over, and she knew it.